Hello and welcome to Video Game Hangover. I'm Randy Dickinson and I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Hello, I'm DJ Ross. I'm in Mountain View, California.
Each week on Video Game Hangover, we talk about the games that have been keeping us up at night. On this week's show, we're checking out the demo for Pikmin 4. Plus, we're playing Crusader of Centy and Death and Taxes.
Those are two separate games.
They are, yes. Yeah. Three separate games.
Oh, right. It was like Shin-Chan and the Professor and the Crusader of Centy and Death and Taxes.
Yes, yeah. The only thing guaranteed in life is Pikmin 4 and Death and Taxes.
and Shin-Chan. Just
Shin-Chan
himself into things.
Correct. All of them on summer vacation somehow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now's the time.
It is true, yes, yeah. If you're going to do it, the summer is the time to do it.
Although, you know, I've always told people the best time to go to Hawaii is in the off-season, because then there are fewer people and plane tickets are cheaper. And it's still Hawaii when you get there, so it's fine.
Fewer people is always a good incentive. I'm good with fewer people.
Yeah.
And what are you doing with your summer vacation?
What am I doing? Well,
Yeah.
I'm not going to Hawaii, unfortunately.
No. You were there already this year, though. You can't go back. Just once a year. That's it.
I mean,
Yeah.
I would love to go back, but it's summer vacation. I can't go to Hawaii. Are you crazy? I'll go for Christmas. How's that?
You and millions of other people have the same idea on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you something I did. I watched the Dungeons and Dragons movie.
I watched it too.
Oh, you did? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, isn't this a pleasant coincidence? Totally not planned.
No. It popped up on Peacock or whatever that channel is. Paramount Plus.
Yeah. The
and
Star Trek app.
I would like to, to some people, yeah, sure, it might be that. I don't know what else I use Paramount Plus. It's the Scream app. That was we watched all the Scream movies on Paramount Plus.
Well, I'll do that next.
Yeah, but wait, that's where all the Mission Impossible movies are?
I noticed I get Paramount Plus through Amazon, so I can't tell half the time what service stuff is actually on.
Oh, gotcha.
I did notice there are a lot more Mission Impossible movies than there used to be on there, so I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll just watch 12 hours of Tom Cruise running weird.
It's funny you should say that. It's because I have had it in my head for a few weeks now that I know I've not seen all of these Mission Impossible movies, but the ones that I've seen, I've enjoyed, and I should really go back and kind of figure out which ones I've not seen and watch those, because the new one comes out this summer and it looks
like a Mission Impossible movie.
Yeah, bombastic and ridiculous.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have decided to just rewatch from the beginning.
Nice.
And we've watched the first one and the second one.
Excellent.
And that was not your point. You want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. Well, we could talk a little bit about Mission Impossible.
Sure.
I mean, whatever.
I really like Dungeons and Dragons. I thought it was a good time.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Quite enjoyed it. Yeah.
I have to admit, when somebody told me they were making a Dungeons and Dragons movie, another one, as it were, I kind of rolled my eyes. I was just like, more sort of like childhood toy IPs. I mean, it's not really a toy, but same sort of deal. Just
sure.
Turn it into a movie. But as soon as I saw the trailer, I was like, oh, okay, so this actually looks pretty good.
Yeah.
It's kind of a comedy. It's not just, super serious, like the Warcraft movie or whatever was going on with that.
Yeah. It's well, I feel like it's sort of like the Guardians of the Galaxy-ing of Dungeons and Dragons.
It was a little bit. Yeah. Chris Pine is in it.
Yeah, it's an irreverent buddy movie.
Yeah. And I was like, that's great. I love when they do that.
Yeah.
It's so much more unusual than if they were just playing it straight. Just do a very, very dramatic Dungeons and Dragons.
Sure. Just take everybody's, I don't know, favorite run from D&D and somehow turn that into a movie. And
right.
No, I think the goal here was to clearly sort of double down on character. And I think it served this really well because it made it much more interesting than whatever the plot of this thing was.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't know anything about Dungeons and Dragons, so I could care less about the lore. I couldn't care less about the lore.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, let's clarify. You could or you could not?
I could not.
Okay.
Right? I couldn't know less. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say.
Gotcha.
But basically, if they just tried to do this and either did a huge lore dump at the start of the movie or expected people to come in knowing who all these people were or having like a deep understanding of them, they probably would have just lost me immediately.
Yes, I agree with that because I played D&D in my life, but I think I was 12 years old the last time I did, and I've not retained a lot of that information. Although there were things that sort of came up in this that they talked about. They talked about the Knights of Neverwinter.
Oh,
and I'm
yeah.
like, that's a video game thing.
Yes. Anything that they mentioned that had also been a D&D video game at some point, I was like, oh, I recognize that. I know that is probably a thing. Yeah. I may not have known it was from Dungeons & Dragons, but now that I think about it, it all makes sense.
Yeah, I certainly didn't know it was from Dungeons & Dragons until I saw the Dungeons & Dragons movie.
Right.
Yeah. There are two things that came up in the movie that, like, immediately I went, that's a D&D thing. And one of them was the treasure chest that had the monster inside, the monster mouth.
That's good. Got to have one of those.
Classic D&D thing. And what was the other thing?
Was it the owl bear?
No, I don't remember the owl bear. I have
no the owl bear
functioning memory of that. Oh no, the big gel block that dissolves you into bones inside. That I remember from D&D as a child.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. It got me real curious about, I was just like, man, I wonder what D&D hardcore fans thought about this. And I just wonder how much of this was just sort of like fan service for them. So I found myself reading a bunch of like trivia pages on this, and they mentioned that block. I can't tell if this is actually what it's called in D&D or this is just how they were describing it on these trivia pages, but they just refer to it as the gelatinous cube. And I was like, I guess that sounds like it could be a thing. I kind of like that, it doesn't have, a fancier or more embellished name. It's like, just the big old gelatinous cube. Watch out. Don't get stuck in it. It's good.
Yeah. But it was fun. It was like a road trip buddy comedy. Everybody seemed like they were having a really, really good time. Hugh Grant, who,
yes. I don't
love Hugh Grant. I don't line up to see Hugh Grant movies. Really just went to town on this thing. I felt like he was having the best time as the ne'er-do-well buddy / occasional villain of this movie. It was delightful. I hope they made enough money to continue making these because I would certainly watch the further adventures of this group of ragtag people.
Yeah. So good. So imaginative. I really think that they did a lot of stuff in this movie, a lot of fun set pieces that you can really only get away with when you're in an outlandish setting like this. And it was just so fun. So yeah, I'm in the same boat. I would love to see another one of these or something.
Yeah. I know that the directors of this thing are big D&D guys. And lobbied hard to get this job to make this movie and sort of understood the assignment and tried really hard to sort of make it a thing that was accessible, but also sort of, people who were hardcore into D&D would sort of appreciate what they brought to the screen. So in the course of your research, did you find that it generally landed well with hardcore fans?
Oh, no, I'm still I haven't looked that far into it. I was just trying to inform myself first.
Gotcha.
I'm a little scared to dip into the D&D forums or wherever those people hang out on the internet, to be honest.
The dark web, yeah.
Yeah, but no, I'd love to hear what the general impression was.
Yeah. I can say the directors have a previous movie. I think their first movie was called Game Night. And I really like that movie. I'm a big fan of that. It's got Jason Bateman in it and a bunch of other really good folks. And it's friends get together for a weekly game night, but one night it sort of like turns into like a real caper. I think they do this well. They do this sort of like kind of humble, collection of friends and acquaintances, and it turns into like an adventure.
Plans really going awry.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like Game Night. I thought that was it was a much better movie than I think it needed to be. And again, another one of those ones where everybody sort of seemed like they were having a really, really good time with it. So if you like Dungeons & Dragons, would recommend also checking out Game Night from a few years ago.
I had to say, I was not I was prepared to not give that movie a second glance, but after seeing this, I was like, oh, okay, maybe there's more going on there. So we sort of taking another look at that. So, interesting. It did get me thinking, though, when am I going to get a Final Fantasy game that is like this movie? Because as long as Final Fantasy is just going to be a movie now, if Final Fantasy 16 is anything to go on, why don't they just make a comedy? I wanted for so long for them to just make a comedic Final Fantasy, because, the past games have all had a bit of a sense of humor, but none of them I would describe as just being like a straight through comedy, start to finish. I think they could take some notes from this movie and do something along those lines.
How involved are American, or at least sort of like Western developers in the Final Fantasy process? Because I think maybe there is, a situation where they need a writer's room of maybe with a little more diversity and not just, a straight Japanese ticket assembling this thing. I think a lot of comedy is regional to a certain degree, and you might need somebody else at the table who has a slightly different perspective on what's funny.
That's a good point. I think it actually would make it, the fact that they would have to get this to work across regions would make it just that much more difficult to do a comedy. Although, so the lead, what's his name? It's like head of localization, basically, the chief localizer on 16. And previously 14 is just he's like some American guy, Michael Christopher Koji Fox. And I think he, you always hear about, the director, producer, the composer, art director and everything. I think Koji, as he's known to his fans, he deserves a huge amount of credit for not only for 14, he's an amazing job of just elevating the localization there, but yeah, the writing in 16 is so good, just like the dialogue and everything. And I'm sure he just, had a huge hand in that, because I don't know if he co-writes it. I think to 14, on some legs of 14, he has basically been co-writer with whoever the lead Japanese writer is. But he's had a huge part in ensuring that, first of all, the sort of translation / localization is authentic, and also that it lands with audiences outside of Japan.
Sure.
Because, sometimes that's a struggle for properties that you need to translate from one language to the next.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, so he has a great track record. I feel like he also has just a ridiculous sense of humor. So if they were going to task somebody with making a comedic Final Fantasy, I think he would be amazing to have on that team. But yeah, maybe I wonder if the difficulties in making a game that is a comedy from the origin would just be too much to actually make work if you had to translate it to a whole bunch of different regions. Because there are not a lot of games in general that do comedy well.
No, I agree. I think we've had sort of versions of this conversation in the past, and I really think a lot of comedy sort of relies on sort of kind of a little bit of a sort of regional sort of agreement on what we find funny, and some of it is timing based, and that I think that timing is so hard in a video game because it's not up to a director in that situation; it's up to the player to sort of dictate the flow of conversation and stuff like that. Usually, unless it's a cutscene.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it is really, really difficult to sort of make jokes land in video games. And yeah, there's not a ton that do it well. I think some adventure games get away with it pretty well. I think certainly Uncharted has sort of funny bits in it, but most of that stuff comes through over the course of, cinematics and stuff like that. So it's not necessarily, you doing dialogue choices that sort of result in, joke, punchline, laughter.
Yes, yeah. I think you would have to approach it very differently than you would just making a comedy movie or TV series. Because I'm not thinking I want a Final Fantasy game where they're just dropping sort of punchlines every 30 seconds, and that's my ideal comedic Final Fantasy. I think I would love it to just be more tonally a comedy, not this whole Game of Thrones stuff, but just like Dungeons and Dragons, where it's kind of scrappy, and it's just, they're not necessarily there to tell jokes, although there are plenty of jokes in Dungeons and Dragons, but
Yeah.
it's just a funny situation they're in a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Like, I think the most recent game I played that I would consider comedy is probably Yakuza 7, because it's sort of like along the lines of what I just described. It's not like, they're just there to tell jokes, but it's like 3 or 4 homeless guys at the start of the game, and they're hitting people with like garbage and like baseball bats and fighting against weird sort of like caricatures of I was going to say like of people from Japanese society, but it's sort of like you've got the weird businessmen and just every enemy in the game is just kind of a weird like stereotype, and it's just very silly without having to be like, it's not Ichiban dropping one-liners whenever he defeats some guy, which I think would get grating very quickly.
Right. Yeah, it's not necessarily sort of written funny, but it is absurd, and that's funny, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Yeah, I think there's definitely stuff in Yakuza 7, and that's my only Yakuza experience, of course, but like in the context of just experiencing that game for the first time, going, what is happening right now? This is so bizarre. And it's a lot of weird choices, but yeah, that sort of, begets comedy. And it's certainly very kind of meme friendly too, I think. So,
yeah. So I would love
Yeah.
to see a Final Fantasy game like that, where, it's not the hero who was foretold by legend or whatever. It's just like the B team. Chris Pine is there.
Yeah.
Doesn't quite know what he's doing. That'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think that's I like that about sort of the approach to Dungeons and Dragons, and that everybody in it is a bit of a scoundrel. And and no one is really sort of like the best in class, right? Like you said, nobody is sort of like the hero foretold. They're just sort of the guy that's available.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And yeah, I like it when you kind of get that group of people together. Again, Guardians of the Galaxy, I think, sort of excels at that too, is that these are not like, not the heroes you deserve. They're just the ones that happen to be there right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that works if you do it well. And it makes it all the more, exciting when they pull off whatever the big thing is.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, luckily, they're the protagonists in the movie still, so they're allowed to do that.
Right. Yeah, that helps too.
But anyway, super fun movie. I was so glad to finally get a chance to see it.
Yeah, likewise. It was not Sarah's first choice for how we spend our Saturday night, but I'm like, please go with me on this. I've heard it's really funny. And I showed her the trailer for it, and she was like, oh yeah, this actually does kind of look funny. So we went with it, and she's like, I hope I don't need to know anything about Dungeons and Dragons. I don't think I know anything about Dungeons and Dragons. So it does not require a good sort of base knowledge. I think it kind of gets you up to speed pretty well. But yeah, it was good. It was very entertaining.
Yeah.
Can I pivot quickly to Mission Impossible?
Yeah. Let's not forget.
The first one's great. I think the first one really still works. The technology is hysterical.
It's good. Tom Cruise is doing everything through his email.
They pull out a laptop from 1994, and I'm like, what is that thing? But I think that there's like good double crosses. There's some really like just iconic action stuff happening in the first one. The drop from the ceiling kind of pirouette. So you can't touch the floor, and him hanging from the suspension thing, hacking the computer. The helicopter chase through the tunnel. I think there's like things that have gone on to like be parodied in other action movies. Like We're Born in the first Mission Impossible. And it's just a really good like spy movie.
Yeah, one of the,
like
the greatest sort of like spy movies of all time, I would say. Yeah.
And then the second one is just stupid.
No, the second one's great. I mean, it is stupid, but it's also just incredible.
And like and everybody like is what it says on the can. Like nobody is like, doing a double cross or is duplicitous like the guy that you think is the villain is the villain, and he's just going to chew scenery for the next 2 hours. There's a lot of like exposition of like how some killer virus works, and like I don't know why any of that's in there. It's not tonally, it is so different from the first movie. It's obviously it's a different director. And I think both Brian De Palma and John Woo kind of steered Mission Impossible into their own particular flavor. But yeah, whatever was happening in the second one just did not work for me. And I'm like, man, if the rest of them came out like this, I don't know how I would feel about the Mission Impossible series. I'm so glad, who came third? J.J. Abrams kind of at least sort of made an attempt to kind of drag it back in the direction of the first Mission Impossible movie.
Yeah. Oh, I love the fact that it just makes a hard right turn or left turn, or whichever way it's turning in Mission Impossible 2. I just love the idea that it could be sort of an anthology series at that point.
Yeah.
Just, just do whatever you want. It's the Zelda 2 of Mission Impossible movies. It's really good.
I mean, I do appreciate, I think I would appreciate the Mission Impossible series more if that was the case. If we're going to get like an auteur, an interesting director to sort of put their stamp on what they think a Mission Impossible movie should be.
Yeah.
And if you did that 7 times, of course, you would get sort of varying results. Maybe the worst that can be said about the Mission Impossible movies is after J.J. Abrams. They all get kind of samey, I think.
Oh, yeah. They really blend together. I don't even know how many there are at this point, but I don't know which ones go in the middle.
7 over 23 years or something like that, which is insane too.
I remember the first 3, and I remember the one that has Superman in it. What's his name? Henry Cavill. That one was real good. But like, what happened in between those? I have no idea.
Yeah.
They were climbing the Burj Dubai at one point, but that's all I remember.
Well, they blend together so well that I don't know which ones I've seen and haven't. Like, I read the descriptions on Paramount Plus, and then I watch the trailer, and I'm like, did I see this, or did I just see the commercials for this?
Yeah.
And like, there was no point in Mission Impossible 1 or 2 where I felt like that at all. Like, this does not feel like anything samey. If anything about sort of the first Mission Impossible was just sort of like, every time like a scene would come, I was like, this is iconic. This is like action movie history. Like, you know what I mean? I sort of felt like there were parts of that I was like, oh man, like so much in this. Like, after Die Hard was a thing, there were so many things that were like Die Hard on a train, Die Hard in a supermarket, et cetera, et cetera. And Die Hard became a genre in a lot of ways. And I think Mission Impossible did that to action movies for a while too. I'm not sure if that's still happening. I feel like it's just sort of like, what is Tom Cruise's like giant, absurd, death-defying trick for this one? As he approaches his 60th year on planet Earth. How many times can we beat the snot out of this guy and drop him out of a helicopter?
Yeah, he's probably glad to be getting out of those.
Yeah, but still, consistently entertaining. I thought that second one was a bit of a yawner, but I know it's all uphill from here.
You don't think the motorcycle joust in midair is not one of the iconic scenes in cinema?
It is. Here's that word again. It is absurd when they gun their motorcycles and then leap into the air and chest collide with each other. It is equally absurd that the villain, through the entire final act of the movie, wears an entire denim suit. Like jeans with a suit jacket also made out of the same color denim, with a denim shirt and a denim tie.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what can you do? It was like 1999 or whenever in Australia. Who knows what was going on?
And at no point does he take the suit jacket off to like beat up Tom Cruise. Like, the entire finale is the two of them scrapping on the beach, and he's still got the entire suit on, tie and all.
It's a movie. I mean, and it's a John Woo movie on top of all that. So, you got to look good.
Yeah.
Or at least you got to wear a lot of denim, I guess. I don't know.
There were so many doves, it could not have been a John Woo movie. Yeah.
Oh, so good. Do you know who wrote Mission Impossible 2?
I don't know. Robert Towne wrote a bunch of the other ones, the guy that did Chinatown, but I don't know who wrote the second one.
It was Ronald D. Moore and Brannon Braga, who are most known for writing a bunch of the Star Trek The Next Generation movies.
Oh,
so you keep that in mind the next time you watch it.
I don't know if that helps with context or not. That's
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what you're supposed to like derive out of that, but it's just a thing to think about the next time you're watching. You're just like, oh, Star Trek. All right. Okay. Motorcycles.
Now I can't stop thinking about it. Yeah. But I'm going to continue working my way through the Mission Impossible series. I believe at some point I will get to 2 of them that I've not seen before. But
that'll be exciting.
It'll be exciting when it happens. And then the new one I think is out. It just came out. So I'll wait for that to join the rest of them on Paramount Plus.
Yes. I'm like not invested in these enough that I would probably go see one in the theater.
No.
Probably Mission Impossible 2 was the last one I saw in a theater. But I will gladly watch it when it's on streaming.
Yes, I agree with that. There's not a lot at this point that I feel like I need to like go to the theater to see. The time between movie theater release and it popping up on some streaming service is so short at this point that it's barely worth getting excited about going to the movies for. Although I want to see Oppenheimer. I think that might be worth it.
Oh, in a theater, you want to get destroyed by a nuclear bomb?
I do. I want to see it in 70 millimeter and just blow my ears out, and then go see Barbie.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I would love to, if we were still in the time when I was just like, yeah, let's go to the movie theater, I would love to do that double feature, but probably not going to happen.
The Barbieheimer, yeah.
Barbieheimer. Once they're both on streaming, or once they're both, available to rent or buy on digital or whatever, maybe I'll still do that. That'll be great. Sure.
Just treat yourself to like a 5-hour marathon of eye-popping entertainment. Yeah. We should pivot to video games before we get angry emails and tweets from our listeners.
Yeah.
Pikmin 4 is coming soon. It comes out this month, July 20-something, I believe. And there is a demo for it, which DJ and I both played.
We did.
Yeah. Do you love Pikmin games? Are you thrilled that there's a new Pikmin? Does this mean a lot to you?
I think I don't like Pikmin games, actually. I was arguing with one of my friends. I was just like, yeah, I like Pikmin. I mean, I like the idea of Pikmin. And I like maybe the first few hours of each Pikmin game, but after that it gets just like very stressful.
Yes.
And I don't like that. So do I like Pikmin games? I think I don't like most of them.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my experience with Pikmin 3, which is the only kind of mainline Pikmin game I've played up to this point. I didn't play 1 or 2. I've played the little 2D platformer on the 3DS, which is nothing like the rest of them.
Yeah, that one does not count.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
I like Pikmin Bloom, but that is not a Pikmin game.
Sure, right. I like that too. I think it's funny that there's a little barcode you could scan at the beginning of the Pikmin 4 demo that's like, this will unlock stuff in Pikmin Bloom. Oh, yeah. I'm like, if only I was still playing Pikmin Bloom.
Yeah, no, I had to. I left Pikmin Bloom on my old phone. I didn't transfer it over, so unfortunately, I was like, I would love to scan that code, but I wouldn't do anything with it.
But yes, I think that you're absolutely right. Is you do get to a point, kind of mid to late Pikmin experience, where you have a number of factors that drive me crazy in video games. You have things that are sort of like time sensitive, where you have like sort of arbitrary time limits placed on things. Then you get like this weird. Pikmin does it too. They have the musical cue that starts to happen as you approach nightfall on any given day in the game, and it and like the intensity starts to crank up, and I'm like, no, we're all gonna die. I can't get back to the ship fast enough, and you get the horrible sound of all of your Pikmin being eaten to death by giant birds.
Yeah, it's both of those things are the same for me. I don't like. For some reason, I'm just very OCD about my little Pikmin army in this, and I think it's because at the end of the day, it shows you how many Pikmin died. And it's so easy to keep that at 0 for like the first few days in the game. And you feel really good about it.
It sets an unrealistic expectation for how the rest of it's going to go.
Like, I'm so good at Pikmin, didn't lose a single one. And then the first time you lose one, you're just like, oh, what happened? You start asking yourself a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So I guess just not about that. I also don't really like the time limit thing. The daily time limit thing, I don't really have an issue with. In the first Pikmin, though, you had like 30 days to finish the entire game, like 30 in-game days. And that was so paralyzing to me, I couldn't even really play that game past more than like 1 or 2 days, because I was just like, what decisions am I making incorrectly that is just going to get me like blocked and not able to complete the mission in 30 days? So I just kind of gave up on it. And then they got rid of it in Pikmin 2. You still had the daily time limit, but I was fine with it because, I'll just come back tomorrow if I'm not done. I'll just play super conservatively, so I don't even have to worry about getting everybody back to the ship on time. I'll just leave early if I have to. Because I had an unlimited time limit. And I don't think, did Pikmin 3 have the 30-day time limit? I didn't play Pikmin 3.
Recall. I didn't see the end of that game. I played quite a bit of the beginning up to the middle, I think, but certainly didn't see credits roll, so I'm not sure if you're stuck on a calendar like that, but there definitely are a lot of like time limits to things. And certainly there's the, every time night falls, the monsters come out essentially and start eating up all your Pikmin. And that is horrifying as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I find that since you don't have the 30-day limit anymore, the daily time limit is effectively, it's just a nuisance, because you can just, like me, just pack up ahead of schedule and come back before it even becomes an issue. I mean, unless there are other things that you can't do because of the daily time limit, but I did not run into anything like that in the demo.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. Yeah, I think like on the surface, this should work for me because I feel like it certainly has elements of Pikmin games in general, and certainly Pikmin 4 have elements of strategy games, which I dig generally. Tower defense, which again I dig generally, and like cute little platformy things happening, which I like almost without sort of generalization. I like those things in games, yeah, there's just something about the way that it all kind of comes together in Pikmin that it rubs me the wrong way after a few hours. I think there's an attempt being made in Pikmin 4 to sort of address some of the issues that I have with the series. Like the camera feels like it's in a different place. They used to feel very overhead, and now it's sort of like a little further down and back behind the main character. So it feels a little bit more like a third person kind of adventure platformer.
Yeah, I noticed it felt a little different. It feels like you can really drop it way down low. So you're almost like, it's very immersive. You feel like you're the guy, you're the little miniature character exploring the world.
Everybody in it is very sort of diminutive. You have these little explorers, these little astronauts, and of course, the tiny little Pikmin that follow them around. It feels, I like the way that it feels, sort of having the camera sort of that low and down behind them now. And everything just sort of feels looming and giant. Because you're on some version of Earth that has weird monsters and animals in it, but like you're clearly in many of the games, like somebody's house or somebody's backyard or in their garden and stuff like that. So it's sort of normal size, but because you're tiny, everything feels impossible.
When I actually need to do anything, though, I just zoom it way back out because you got to see everything, right? Or do you keep the camera zoomed in?
For Pikmin 4, the demo, I think I kind of kept it right behind.
Really?
Yeah, the little Randy character I made.
Couldn't you just like not see any of your guys though? I think that would make it hard.
No, I didn't really feel like a disadvantage. I mean, you have sort of pretty liberal use of the camera, so I definitely did a lot of like, it tells you repeatedly, use the ARC camera to look around. So I did a lot of that, but no, I never really felt like I was at a disadvantage or missing anything.
Interesting. It's like in Final Fantasy, you just spend so much time designing your character and putting all this cool armor on them. But when you actually have to do a fight, you just like zoom the camera out as far as it'll go, because that's what gives you the most situational awareness. And then your character is like an inch tall on screen.
Yeah.
So I was just like, no, I just want to see everything that's happening. I need to know if a monster is sneaking up behind me. I can deal with the lack of immersion at that point. But I think it's interesting that you were able to play it with the camera all the way zoomed in, or
I thought
partially zoomed in.
I mean, obviously, sort of a monster sneaking up on you and eating you is very much a reality in Pikmin as well. But
there wasn't a whole lot of that in the demo, so that might have been more of a concern later on.
I was sort of about halfway through the second day of the demo, and the demo's fairly substantial. And the cool thing about it is, if you play it, your progress carries over to the main game if you're going to buy it. I like when they do that. I think that's I don't want to play the same thing over again. So, no, I think it works. I forget what my point was. Because the second
point
time
is you like the demo, but you hate Pikmin.
Yeah, I think I hate Pikmin. Oh no, as I was halfway through the second day, I was sort of like, this feels very gentle. This feels very sort of like cutesy. And of course, all of my Pikmin are surviving through the day.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, oh, we're going to get to like day 10 of this thing, and it's just going to be a slaughter. It's just going to be, all of my Pikmin drowning and doing the scream while they blub, blub, blub under bubbles, and I'm going to hear it in my sleep. And it's quite traumatizing. I really just got to parts of Pikmin 3 where I was like, I can't deal with like a total team wipe anymore. I can't deal with getting back to the ship with, all of my objectives complete, but half of my Pikmin.
Just your sole surviving Pikmin.
Right. That's just painful. And I think, the easiest way to sort of maybe embrace these games is to just realize you're going to lose some Pikmin.
Oh, yeah. You have to.
And it's hard to wrap my brain around that. I just can't Particularly when you get that tally, like you said at the end. I'm like, nah, I want that number to be 0. 0 Pikmin lost. And it's really just not a reality for how these games tend to work.
Right. Yeah, I really enjoyed the demo because it was just the opening hours of the game where everything is very friendly and you don't lose any Pikmin. But I know as soon as I get farther into it, it's just going to turn into, one of the previous Pikmin games, which are quite difficult. Like, I played all of Pikmin 2, and it was a lot of Pikmin did not make it out of that one. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not like it's just very stressful. I was gonna say I mean it's true. I'm not a huge fan of real time strategy in general because that is just it's the whole genre is just very stressful intrinsically. Sure. So I don't know. That's like when the game becomes interesting, though. So I feel like it was a lot of fun to just sort of breeze through the demo. You maybe run into 1 or 2 enemies simultaneously at most. So they're just a pushover. And all the Pikmin survive, and it was great. And it was just a nice reminder of what it feels like to play in a Pikmin game. And I was like, all right, that's enough for me. That's I've played my whatever, played enough Pikmin for this decade. I'll check in again with Pikmin 5, maybe.
We're kind of like every 10 years at this point, so it might be 2033 by the time the Pikmin 5 comes out.
Yeah.
Still on the Switch, though. They still haven't upgraded the Switch. It's still just the Switch.
Oh, God.
Came out in 2017.
What a nightmare.
I don't know. I certainly don't think that I need the full game. Not that there was any, it wasn't a bad demo. It certainly looks cute. It's certainly on brand with Pikmin 3, I think. But it's just, I know where this is going, and I know it's going to stress me out and make me sad. So I'm probably best skipping Pikmin 4.
Yeah. With that in mind, I kind of feel like, for all the people who really do get into Pikmin, they should go back and just add in all the stuff that they removed to pacify people like me who are like, oh, I don't want to play Pikmin if I had to beat the whole thing in 30 days. Because weirdly enough, when I was looking at people's reactions to this online, a lot of the comments about it were talking about how there's no time limit anymore. But to my surprise, a lot of people were saying oh, it's so much less interesting without the time limit.
Oh.
And I'm like, yeah, that's true. And a lot of people seem really disappointed. So I feel like, if people like me are just not going to play it, and I can't speak for all sort of casual Pikmin fans, why not just go back to sort of the original vision for it, put that 30-day time limit back in, and force people to go through it and make some decisions? Because I'll admit, I'd love to have a game that's just completely frictionless and you can 100% everything on your first playthrough and then just never take a second glance at it. But that's so dull on some level.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't know that I need a hardcore, Souls-like Pikmin experience, but if there's a taste for that in the community and those are the people that will buy your product most consistently, then why dilute it to get you and I to play the demo and go,
yeah, not gonna play this anyway.
Yeah.
No, I feel like Pikmin has the chance to be like this on the harder end of the sort of Nintendo game spectrum. Because, it's an RTS to begin with, so that's already very demanding. But just put in this weird time limit system. You mentioned sort of the Soulsborne difficulty kind of as a joke, but what if they just cranked it way up? What if you just died so much in this game? I think people, there's an audience for that at this point.
Yeah.
What happened with Metroid Dread?
Yes.
I don't think Metroid games were especially difficult until that game, and then that was just oh, this is what we're doing now? Okay, well, I don't like this anymore, so I'm not going to play the next Metroid game. But people love that game, so why not try it out with Pikmin? If people hate it, you can backpedal with Pikmin 5.
Yeah. Or make it a slider. That's, make it an accessibility option. If you want your Pikmin to be, brutally difficult, then there's a button you can flip to make that the case.
Yeah.
Or make that the default and then make a button that makes it easier for people like me.
Sure. Yeah, just have a thing, turn the time limit on and if you feel like it. Exactly.
Yeah.
I feel a bit hypocritical because one of my favorite games with an arbitrary time limit is Dead Rising 1, which I know a lot of people hated because you had to do things on the clock in that game.
That's what I hate about that game, too.
Yeah.
Like everything else in that game, like, should work for me. But yeah, no, I can't stand the time limits.
Yeah, I was not a fan of it at the start, but as soon as I figured out, like, oh, you just have to, like, know what's happening in the mall at any given moment. And restarting is sort of, would I call it a roguelike or roguelite? Not really, because it's always the same thing. Everything happens in the same sequence. But it's that same sort of loop where you're just like, oh, I messed up this time, so I gotta go back to the beginning and start over, and I will know more on the next playthrough. I could probably work for Pikmin. I think it eventually, like for me, it really worked for Dead Rising. And I think if I had only played Dead Rising as the game that I wanted it to be in the first couple hours of me playing it, where you're just like running through a mall and there's just like no restrictions on whatever you have to do, that's fine. But it's like, how long is that fun? It's like, okay, I've sort of done everything there is to do in this mall, and now what? I don't know.
Yeah, but I think my perspective on Dead Rising, and let's litigate a game that's 15 years old, and neither of us have played for forever, but like the tension in that game, I guess the drama or the fun, or however you sort of approach it, should come from you trying to survive like giant waves of zombies, and not because you didn't cross the finish line in time.
Oh, but it was about trying to survive. It was like trying to do the things necessary to survive, but also accomplish the objectives. Because like if you didn't have the time pressure, there was almost no... it was very easy to just exist in that game if that's all you needed to do. But if you're actually playing through the campaign, you like, oh, I have to make it all the way over here. I need to get enough supplies. You really have to be like on your toes the entire time.
Ugh. And
it was great. So maybe
I don't know.
Right. I know some people just want a relaxing zombie mall experience, but it definitely took me out of my comfort zone a little bit. But the resulting game I found to be just so much better than what I was expecting.
Yeah.
I wonder if I'm like stealth convincing myself to play Pikmin 4. Probably not, because there's not actually any of the restrictions that we're hypothesizing about. But
yeah, it's not going to be the thing you want it to be.
Yeah, so I think that's another reason I'm not super interested in it, is that I feel like it would be very similar to my experience playing Pikmin 2, and I've already played Pikmin 2.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I have not played enough of these to have a sense of like what the jump is between sort of generations of Pikmin, but this experience feels very sort of consistent with my experience of Pikmin 3. And I'm like, so we've changed nothing in 10 years? Like there's really no like advancement in Pikmin technology?
There's always new types of Pikmin, and you've got the weird little dog thing in this one. I don't know how much that changes the gameplay.
Ochi. Yeah, I like the weird dog thing. A little two-legged dog. Not in a sad way, though. Not a sad two-legged
Yes, he's just, they all have two legs.
Yes, this dogs only have two. Yeah. And I'm like, maybe he's not a dog, but then they start calling him a dog, and they said he's a good pup. And I'm like, no, it's a dog. That's weird.
Yeah, it's just a weird dog.
Yep.
So that just feels more incremental to me. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'm glad they're gradually updating these games. But yeah, I don't know. Pikmin's fine.
I'd play another one of those platformers. I thought that what was that called? Let's Go Pikmin, something like that. That was fun. I enjoyed that. Yeah, that was fine. Yeah. So what is Crusader of Centy?
Oh, Crusader of Centy is one of the most recent games added to the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive app on the Nintendo Switch Online thing.
Oh,
is there a more convoluted way to refer to all those apps on the Switch? I always say like it's the Switch Online thing. It's a Switch Virtual Console, but it's like it's not called the Virtual Console.
Yeah,
I don't know what to call them. It is just a branding nightmare. But if you have the Nintendo Online expansion pass that lets you play Genesis games, you can now play Crusader of Centy, which I have it on good authority or I was told on good authority, is a pretty good action RPG for the Genesis / Mega Drive, depending on what region you're in. So I thought, okay, I have almost no experience with Genesis games because I never had one back in the day. And I would love to play an action RPG, so I'll give this one a try. So as you might guess, since it's on the Genesis, it's from 1994. It seems like the consensus is that it is Sega's answer to The Legend of Zelda, because obviously they didn't have The Legend of Zelda.
Oh, interesting.
And they didn't really have anything similar. Or maybe they did, but this was just an attempt to give Genesis owners something Zelda-like. So that's basically the idea. The pretty standard sort of like JRPG premise. In the world, humans and monsters exist. They have been at war with each other for like centuries, I guess, for a very long time. Until there was some cataclysmic event and all the monsters went away. But it turns out they didn't go away. They were just hiding until the time was right, and now they have all reemerged. And they have just been wreaking havoc on the human population. So, in what has got to be the pretty much just most cookie-cutter sort of JRPG game intro, the game starts with you as the main character on their 14th birthday, being given your deceased father's sword so you can go out and join the ranks and fighting the monsters and protecting the town from them. So it was like, okay, that's fine. It's 1994, so there haven't been too many games like this. But I also just appreciate the fact that it's, sort of your typical RPG opening.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just kind of go out and do action RPG / Zelda things. You run your little character around, you swing your sword very similarly to how you swing your sword in A Link to the Past. And you investigate different dungeons and talk to townspeople to get sort of leads on where you should go next and that sort of stuff.
I'm looking at screenshots in this. I would think this is a Zelda game.
Yeah, it's very, I don't know if this sort of aesthetic is something that like Zelda came up with specifically. Link to the Past has definitely inspired a lot of games visually.
And it's definitely that approach to it. It's sort of like, what is that, like 16-bit?
Yeah.
Like kind of isometric, right?
It's like the sort of top-down perspective and everything sort of, there are like multiple levels of depth to the overworld, and it looks sort of like you're in a different valleys and sort of wells because it's all top-down. It's very similar to Link to the Past. But the sort of spin it puts on it is that instead of having your big bag of random magical items that Link has, you just collect animals along the way, or you make allegiances with animals, and then each of the animals follows you around, or you can like equip one or two of them at the same time, and they have their own little special abilities that activate depending on the situation.
Yeah.
Which it took me a little while to find out, because this game, it's definitely from an era where there's no tutorial or anything. I feel like maybe there was a manual if I had bought the actual game cartridge that I would have read and sort of educated myself on how the game works.
Because that children is how you used to get context on video games.
Yeah. Well, you had to have something to read while you're driving home from the store. It started out very easily enough because it's so similar to Zelda. You're just, steering your little guy around. And you go do a little sort of like training course that familiarizes yourself with, how to fight monsters and everything. And I figured I was set. But I got to the point where you have to start relying on the little animal companions to help you out and like use their abilities for stuff. And I could not figure out what was going on. I was like, there's these monsters that I can't hurt because I don't know why. There's a bunch of elemental or environmental obstacles that I can't overcome. So what am I missing? Like, this is one of those cases where you like start to second guess yourself. Like, did I just not talk to the right NPC in the first town? Maybe they had a clue for me. So I backtracked through a whole bunch of the earlier stages.
Oh, thinking maybe you missed something.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of halfway between go talk to every person in a Dragon Quest game, and eventually somebody will tell you where you're supposed to go next. And it also, you just get dumped off onto this overworld map, and it's sort of up to you to progress through each area to get to the next one. And each one is, you have to do a little bit of exploration. So I thought, okay, either there's somebody I didn't talk to, or I just didn't find the right exit or like hidden item in one of these maps. So I'm just going to go and like explore everything again. But it turned out I was just not using these animals correctly. And I figured this out. Eventually, I just got fed up to the point where I was like, okay, I'm going to GameVax. There's definitely going to be guides on this written in the last 30 years or so. So I love this. I go to the Crusader of Centy page, and lo and behold, the first guide at the top of the page is written by CJC himself, the creator of GameFAQs. So I'm like, okay, so this has got to be legit. So I'm going to use this one. And it fills me in on how to use the animals. I'm like, oh, well, in retrospect, that was obvious. But now I'm a little more informed, and I can continue on. I can get past those obstacles that were
and the guy who invented the GameFAQ himself,
yes,
got you there,
Mr. GameFAQ.
Yeah,
I think they call him. So that's great. I don't know if I've even used one of his guides before. I was only vaguely aware that he wrote guides himself, so that's exciting.
Huh.
So now I'm just continuing to make my way through this thing, and I'm having a good time with it. It's a little dated, as you might expect.
Sure.
Light on tutorials, but that's why I got this guide open in a browser tab.
We have a fix for that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little bit on the janky side, but it's also slightly easier than what I would expect from a Zelda game. So I'm finding that it's like just the right balance where I'm like, okay, I'm willing to stick with you, Crusader of Centy, and whatever you're throwing at me. Some of the enemies are a little weird, and it's not quite as tightly tuned as a Zelda game or a Link to the Past anyway. But it's just kind of interesting to just see, like, oh man, all those Genesis owners who could not play A Link to the Past, this is the sort of thing they had in to make up for it. And I imagine if I was in that situation back in the early 90s, like, I could see myself really getting into this, tracking down all the little animal companions and talking to townspeople, all that stuff.
So did this series catch on? Are there other Crusader of Centy games, or was this a one and done and it never quite sort of like approached the lofty success of a Zelda game?
I think this was it. There's another one, like I haven't really looked up on looked up the history of the series at this point, but I've not heard of a sequel or follow-up to this. But there were so many fun little weird, like, offbeat action / or RPG / action RPGs back on the Super Nintendo and on the Genesis as well that never got sequels. That's partially what inspired me to get into this, because I had such a good time playing a bunch of those on the Super NES and just remembering how sort of weird and memorable those were. So I was like, oh man, maybe this is like a hidden gem that I haven't experienced. So I want to check this out, definitely.
Yeah. Well, cool. Cool that it made its way to the Switch. That's, and not just sort of lost to time. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. There's actually, so I am only vaguely aware that there are all these like virtual console apps on the Switch, like especially the newer ones, like the Genesis and the like Game Boy and Game Boy Advance are all on there too.
Mm-hmm.
Not the entire libraries, but there's a surprising amount of stuff on there where I'm like, oh, I would play this, like either because I didn't play this when it first came out, or it's actually like a pretty good game that I would play over again. So just yet another stack of games to add on to the backlog.
There you go.
But anyway, so yeah, that's cool. Crusader of Centy. Not a new game, but if you have a Switch and you have the online expansion thing, it's on the Genesis app, whatever it's called, and you can check it out.
I don't think I've ever launched that Genesis app. I don't know if there's any part of me that's sort of like, I wonder what Genesis games I need to play.
Well, you don't want to play Altered Beast?
I did a couple of years ago. That was one of my backlog attack games, was it not?
Oh, really? Oh man, I forgot about that. That's
certainly
incredible.
not the whole thing, but
Yeah, I mean, why would you play all of that game?
That game, like Pikmin, I think was sort of like, oh, this is really cool in the beginning. This might be for me, and then nope, nah.
Yeah, because it's real tough.
Yeah, it gets really not good.
Yeah, well, yes, well, I mean that is evident pretty quickly. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff out there, or at least maybe I'm in a different situation because, like I said, I never had a Genesis, but I was like, oh, now I can finally play. I'm blanking on it now, but
Crusader of Centy.
Yes, Crusader of Centy. There's a whole bunch of weird like strategy games on there that I want to check out.
Huh.
It's cool just having easy access to it now.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that absolutely. And not have to pick and choose which ones you want to buy because they're all just sort of included with this service you're paying for. Which
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I dig that. I think Nintendo's approach, this sort of this generation for how they're going to sort of curate old games is smart. Even if it's not necessarily for me, I think it's a cool way to sort of preserve some of this stuff and get other people's hands on them.
Yeah. I'm still waiting for Square Enix to get on board and put all their weird stuff like actually, I can't remember if like Illusion of Gaia and Soul Blazer and all those things were published by I think that was Enix back in the day. I could be totally wrong. But, all those weird action RPGs that I was just talking about, waiting for those to show up on the Super NES app.
Yeah. I mean, how cool would it be to have a dedicated Square app on there? I mean, if there's a Sega one.
Yeah.
Oh, the Sega is a platform. It's not a publisher, I guess, for that. It's both.
Right. Yeah, I don't really know what the logistics around it are, if they're just trying to stick to platforms, and in that case, it seems like it's a lot of Nintendo stuff on the Nintendo app. But there's a few, like, I thought there was a Final Fantasy on there, maybe? Am I just imagining that?
I can't confirm, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's not entirely Nintendo first-party stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that is probably the stuff we all recognize, but I'm sure there's others.
Yeah. Like, Winback is on the N64 app. Why is that there? Nobody wants to play that.
That's a random choice. Yeah, and not a first party Nintendo game either, right?
Yeah. So there is a precedent.
Yeah,
it's just very questionable up to this point what they're actually selecting to be on there.
Excellent. Well, I spent the last week playing this little game called Death and Taxes.
How is
that? It doesn't sound like it would be fun.
It doesn't sound very appealing.
No. Which of these things do you like less? No. So the hook here is that you are a recently conjured Grim Reaper, and you work in a high rise along with a bunch of other Grims. And you, on the daily, sit down at your desk and you're presented with some files, some little one-page bios of people that might have to die today. And you get a little transmission from your boss every day that tells you sort of like, today you need, 2 of these people need to die. And so you'll get 4 or 5 files and you go through and you read their little dossiers, and sometimes it kind of tells you who needs to die. Sometimes it's, this person was a smuggler, this person cheated on their partner, this person, et cetera, et cetera. Things that might be sort of like offenses that might be worthy of death.
Okay.
Compared to the other person who is dedicated their life to being a librarian and never hurt a soul.
Is this how the Grim Reaper operates? He's like making like judgment calls on people. I figured he just shows up when it's time.
Yeah, well, I mean, the kind of interesting thing about the perspective here is that you don't necessarily, you don't select the person that's going to die and snap your fingers and they sort of blink out of existence. It creates some sort of machination that leads to that person's death. There are repercussions for people continuing to live as well. So one of the cycles that you get into is every day you sit down at your desk as a Grim Reaper, you get your transmissions, you get your marching orders for the day, all sort of transmitted to you from your boss. The entire sort of play field of the game is a desktop. So you have a fax machine where these dossiers come in of these people who may or may not die today. There's a little handwritten note on the desk from your boss that day. There's other stuff you can kind of buy at the company gift shop of things that you can put on your desk, a little cactus plant, a little radio to listen to music. Some of them, like there's a snow globe that kind of gives you hints about maybe who should die and kind of what the impact on the balance of the universe is if people die. There's a desk lamp that does some interesting stuff. I won't give some of these little secrets away, but they're kind of fun. And yeah, otherwise it's really that your entire perspective on the game for the most part is this desktop as you kind of navigate these dossiers. But you also have a cell phone. So every day you sit at your desk and your phone lights up and you pick it up and you scroll through kind of the in-game version of Twitter with news stories about what happened on the planet yesterday. And you see sort of how your choices have played out in some ways through tweets, which is kind of interesting, is that because you let somebody live, they took their company public and they did something horrible and then 1 million people died. Or, whatever, pick a thing. Because somebody died, this thing happened and a bunch of children were saved from a burning orphanage. So there's a butterfly effect to the choices that you make. It's not necessarily like immediate cause and a death. You don't cause somebody's death and they just drop dead wherever they stand. Like your choices and summarily their life or death kind of have ripples throughout the rest of the universe that you kind of catch up on by reading Twitter.
Well, I mean, they still die right away, right? But then you just observe the effects.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I never got a sense from the game that they just sort of drop where they stand.
I mean, more or less you are sentencing them at that point.
Sure, right, yes. Nobody escapes it. So if you doom somebody to die, they definitely die. But you'll get updates, you'll get tweets about a 12-car pileup on the highway. And one of the people that died is somebody that you stamped for death the previous day. So yeah.
I see. So then you feel bad about all the other people in that pile up.
Right. Yeah, there are unintended repercussions.
So how well can you predict that kind of stuff?
You can't always. Sometimes you get tweets that sort of clue you in on stuff. You'll get little hints via the in-game Twitter about people that you maybe want to let live. And then their dossier will come your way and you get to make a choice. And the kind of the interesting thing here is that there are a bunch of different sort of pathways to different endings based on your choices of who lives and who dies. There's kind of an overarching plot. Your boss in the office building is Fate. He's been alive for millions of years. All the Grimms report to him. And at the end of every day, you check in with him and he sort of gives you your daily assessment of how your work was and how well you followed orders. You can sort of choose to not follow orders. You can you'll get an order one day that says, 4 of these 8 people need to die. You should make sure that at least 2 of them are over 50. Or you should make sure at least 2 of the people who die have a background in politics. So you really have to kind of read through some of their dossiers with kind of a fine-tooth comb and make some mental notes about who lives and who dies in that scenario. And you can't just choose to let everybody live or make everybody die, because there are repercussions for that. You'll get fired, you'll get a game over, and you have to start back at scratch. But you can sort of choose to ignore some of the secondary things. You can sort of if I don't make enough people over 50 die, your boss might let some of that slide. If you don't wipe out all the politicians, he might let some of that slide as long as you met the overarching sort of objective of number of people who have to die. So there's ways that you can kind of skirt the rules to kind of guide the game in a slightly different path. And that was kind of interesting once I learned that was what was happening. That I couldn't be a flat out rebel and just make everybody live or die, but I could sort of ignore some of the secondary things because it got real difficult at times. Sort of these are all school teachers. I can't, or something kind of ambitious and progressive and wholesome like that. I can't just wipe all these people out. So you kind of end up going through some of the dossiers looking for little notes that they might be duplicitous or horrible in some secret way, and mark them for death, even if it doesn't quite necessarily meet the marching orders that you have for a particular day. So it's interesting. It's obviously it's a very sort of ready game. You for the most part sit at a desk, read dossiers of people who may or may not die, and then you ride the elevator up to the top floor, and you have a little one-on-one, all done with like conversation trees with fate on your performance for the day. Go to bed, start the next day over again, and you go through 4 weeks of this. And there's an overarching plot. There's tensions escalate. Death is a little. I'm sorry, not Death. Fate, your boss, is a little sort of disillusioned with the state of humanity. There's a bar that eventually opens. You can kind of hang out and chat with some of the other Grim Reapers and with the Crypt Keeper, essentially, who runs the archive in the basement floor. So you get some other color. You get a bunch of kind of interesting characters. But your biggest task and what you spend most of the time doing in the game is reading profiles of people who may or may not die, and you basically stamp their profile for death in a lot of ways. In every way. Whether or not you find that appealing as a gamer, I can't necessarily say. I thought it was cool. I thought it was an interesting sort of object lesson. I think it felt a little bit like the game Papers, Please.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds a lot like that game.
There was a lot more nuance to Papers, Please. There were a lot of things in that game that were like, I don't feel good about any of this.
Yeah, right.
and because the choices you make in Death and Taxes are so binary, live or die, it becomes a little easy to just sort of rubber stamp people later in the game. They're like, nope, you're terrible. You cheated in the election. You're going to die. You're terrible. I don't know. Pick some horrible offense, you're going to die. So it ends up being very easy to sort of like doom people sometimes. Whereas the choices in Papers, Please were less binary, and more often than not, the choices that you had in that game were all equally terrible.
Yeah.
So
it's like you had to meet your quota or whatever.
It's less subtle than Papers, Please. And maybe that's good. But it's entertaining. I think it does some interesting stuff. I like that there are multiple pathways. There are ways that you sort of can rebel against the Grim Reaper system to try to sort of like preserve people you think sort of have value or add value to humanity. I don't think it asks a lot of like big questions in the way that Papers, Please does, but it is this sort of interesting construct of death as a bureaucracy. And it's, I just think it's kind of entertaining. You can kind of get through it. I got through it in just under 3 hours. So it doesn't overstay its welcome in any way. And it gives you tools to go back to be able to kind of make some slightly different decisions in like a new game plus structure to kind of pursue your game, to steer your game into some of those alternate endings. So it's kind of fun. It's a little bit of a choose your own adventure. I appreciate kind of the assembly of this thing. And I didn't quite sort of see the full scale of it as I was playing it. It sort of like became clear to me as I kind of got further in, and I missed one of my objectives for the day and didn't get fired, didn't get a demerit. And I was like, oh, maybe I can be a little more rebellious. Maybe I don't always have to just do what they tell me to do. And that feels very liberating in a video game sometimes. So, it's cool. I think I would recommend this.
Is it the same sequence of dossiers every time, so it's like the same game roughly, and you just make different decisions?
It might be. I think that's true. I guess I didn't think about how random these are. Yeah, it may serve you the same dossiers over and over in the same exact order. And your charge obviously is just making slightly different decisions as they come your way.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. You mentioned there was like an overall story. You'd follow the same sort of like decision points.
Yeah, they have to still kind of get you across the finish line, right? So I think some of that is influenced too by the conversations that you have with your boss more than anybody. The stuff I think in the bar is probably just color. The trinkets you can put on your desk, the little widgets and stuff like that, I think are just kind of color in the game. You get a daily pay, like a stipend for your work. And you have to spend it somewhere in the company store. You don't ever leave the building. You're stuck in this high rise. So there's only one place you can spend the money. Your boss even says to you at some point, you get paid for this. Don't spend it all in one place. Although actually there's only one place you can spend it.
Your Grim Reaper scripts or whatever.
Right. So it's, it's cool. It's like this like interesting, compact experience. It's fully voice acted. The voice acting is quite good. There's a lot of really interesting characters in it. The music in it is fun too. It's a lot of like kind of light jazz, but when you get the little radio that you transistor radio you can put on your desk, you can kind of change channels and do different like musical genres, all done by the same composer. And here's the thing I really like is that the credits of the game are life and death dossiers of everybody who made the game.
Oh, nice.
So you as the player can go through and mark them all for death or for life if you choose to. I just think it's super clever, and it's a way to kind of continue the little hijinks essentially they built in the course of the game.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so it's cool. It's like I said, it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's a fun little kind of gaming experiment. Whether or not you sort of find death, I guess, kind of amusing. Your mileage may vary, but I liked it. I thought it was really kind of a fun thing. I'm playing it on the Switch, but I know it's on other consoles as well.
Thanks.
I like a single sitting game. I like a game that I can kind of get through in an experience, and it still feels like it has, kind of done its thing. And 2.5 hours, 3 hours is just about the right amount of time, I think, for something like this. If this was a 10-hour experience, I probably would have fizzled out at one point. But the fact that you realize at some point you're on kind of a 28, 30-day calendar, this is not a thing that's going to overstay its welcome.
You're not going to go back and do the New Game Plus thing, get a different ending?
I have already. I've kind of picked through some of those things already a little bit. I don't. The screen it presents you with at the end of all potential endings is a lot. So I don't know that I'm necessarily going to steer it to every single one of those. And also, I don't know that I could I would have had to maybe have started a chart of like choices I made and who lived and who died. And I don't have like photographic recollection of all of that from my first playthrough. So I'm sure, again, there's probably a game fact somewhere that would get me through it. But no, it's just kind of fun to kind of mess around with it and make some slightly different choices. And there is a dialogue choice almost all the time that is you just being disrespectful and nasty to your boss. And I kind of just want to pick those over and over again to see what that gets me. Fate is sort of initially depicted as kind of a very imposing, kind of like all-powerful character. And it would just be delightful, I think, to sort of see his response if I'm just shitty to him all the way from birth to death. I think it would be cool. So I kind of want to try that out. But yeah, no, it's a cool little video game experiment, I think.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is it what was I going to ask? Is there like one true ending? Like visual novel style, you play all the different paths and it gives you the clues to like sentence the correct people, and then everybody lives or something, or like only the bad people die or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know if I feel like it's steering me towards something that feels like a true ending. The thing that it does with the myriad endings is that screen at the end that sort of shows which ending you've sort of unlocked. Mm-hmm. It tells you what the percentage of players is that have gotten that ending.
Okay.
So I think there's something interesting in sort of like critical mass, right? Like, if 100 people play the same video game and we all make slightly similar choices, does that make that the true ending?
Oh, okay. But it's not like they have set aside like, oh, this is the one that everybody is ideally supposed to arrive at.
No, at least that's not transmitted to me or like communicated to me in any way.
Okay.
Although one of the endings that I did get says that like 84.1% of players have done it, and I'm like, I feel like that's probably as close as I'm going to get to 100%. I feel like, if 100% is maybe like the ending they intended, or the ending that you can sort of get to the most easily or with the least amount of like stupid choices, I guess, then that's probably as close as I'm going to get.
Mm-hmm. You don't think it's like, you just mouth off to your boss and he fires you after a week, and it's like, no, that's the whole thing. That's
the 100%er. Yeah, maybe that'd be interesting. I don't know. I'm not sure if how many people, like, I don't pick up a video game thinking like I'm gonna like break it in my first try, right? I think I sometimes I sort of, particularly in games where you can choose like, do you want to be a maverick or do you want to be kind of the cool guy? You know what I mean? Like, I kind of choose sometimes, I think, in the first playthrough, like the path of least resistance. I'm never, what's the thing from Mass Effect? Is it Renegade?
Renegade, yeah.
Like the asshole. Like, I'm just never like, I'm never that character deliberately given a choice in some of these, like, dialogue tree video games.
Yeah. I always play it on, the light path the first time.
So yeah, I don't ever sort of start a video game thinking, can I break this? Particularly something like this where I didn't know a ton about it before I started playing it. I guess I didn't necessarily know, that there were multiple options until I was already there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is called Death and Taxes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do you do taxes at some point?
There's a tax department. They mentioned that, like in the skyscraper where all the Grim Reapers work, there is a tax department. And I think somebody threatened you at one point that they're going to send you to work in the tax department. So,
yeah, you're going to get transferred. Okay, that's good.
There is at some point, there's a day. Is that a spoiler? That might be a spoiler. I'll stop that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Never mind.
There's some fun stuff they do that gets you kind of a different perspective on how death works in the universe.
Interesting.
Yeah, I like it. It's good. I find it endearing. It makes me want to continue to go back at it and kind of poke at it a little bit. Yeah.
I was just shocked to find out that there are multiple Grim Reapers, but then I remembered that Vampire Survivors already taught me that, and they all wear brightly colored robes.
Yeah, you're like Reaper number 96 or something like that. So there were at least 95 before you.
Oh wow, that's a lot of Reapers. That's even more than I was expecting.
They tell you at some point that burnout is high. So I imagine, like, at some point, some of them have retired. Not all 95 of them are active at once.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
It seems like a job that would probably have a lot of turnover.
It's very stressful, it seems like.
That is one of your dialogue, and I find that interesting too. That's one of your dialogue options in the game, is like, you can constantly sort of like convey to your boss that none of this feels good. I don't understand why I'm here. Every choice I make feels horrible. I feel terrible at the end of every day. And I'm not sure what that gets you either. I'm curious to sort of where that pathway, like, I am being held against my will and doing a job that I feel horrible about. Like, how does that pay off and where does that ending go?
Mm-hmm.
So it's, again, kind of curious that it gives you options to sort of approach the game from quite a few different ways.
Well, sounds cool.
Yeah, definitely. I grabbed this for cheap, like less than $7, if I remember correctly, on the most recent eShop sale. That may still be happening when you listen to this podcast. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, check it out.
Cool.
And I think that about does it.
I think that's it. Unless they've released any new Mission Impossible movies while we were recording.
God, I hope not. I have trouble keeping up at this point. If you need any more video game hangover in your brain, you should follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/VGHangover. You can always get show notes and links and tell us what you thought about this episode at VGHangover.com. You can hang out with us on Discord, chat about video games and other fun stuff. You can get a link to that at VGHangover.com. And we would love for you to subscribe, rate, and review us on your podcasting app of choice. We're on all of them. If there is a place where they make podcasts, we're probably there. Stitcher's going away. Stitcher was one of the original big ones, and now they're shutting it down. So we'll be there as the thing burns to the ground. I'm not sure how they're twilighting Stitcher, but we are there if you're still using the app. And maybe help us out by telling your friends about the show.
Yeah, that'd be great. Helps us spread the word about the show, bring in new listeners. We really appreciate it. Speaking of people we really appreciate, I want to give thanks again to Fear of Dark for our intro and outro music this week. If you'd like to hear more of his work, you can go to fearofdark.bandcamp.com and maybe add a few of those albums to your cart and send him some cash. That would be terrific.
Nice. And tell him you heard it on Video Game Hangover.
Yeah.
We'll be back next week. Until then, this is Randy Dickinson.
This is DJ Ross.
Thanks for listening. Have a good week.
Good night.
Bye.